Katie Ross. I lead sustainability for Microsoft's global real estate portfolio. And today I want to talk to you about some of the work we've been doing on reducing carbon and specifically embodied carbon on our new construction projects within our real estate portfolio. So just to set the background, Microsoft has been committed for quite some time to sustainability. We became a carbon neutral company in 2012. We have an internal carbon tax, which we actually charge our business units for the amount of carbon they emit and use that funding to further our sustainability initiatives and projects. And we have been focused on sustainability not only as an opportunity for an opportunity for us, but also as a responsibility. As we grow, we really have to think of the impact that we have on the environment. And so one of the things that we sort of did in 2020 was step back and said, are our sustainability commitments enough? And the answer was unequivocally no, they are not, nor is anyone's at this point. And so we spent the year in 2020 thinking about what it would look like to have them be enough, and also have them be aligned with where we see climate science today. So we made the announcement over the course of the year that we will become a carbon negative, water positive, zero waste company that's focused on ecosystem preservation and building a planetary computer. And so there's a lot to unpack with all of those commitments, and I'll really focus today on our carbon commitment. As you can imagine, carbon negative really spans every aspect of our business. So this is our 2019 carbon emissions, just to sort of give you a sense of where it breaks down. We emit roughly 16 million metric tons of carbon a year. Our previous carbon neutrality commitments focused only on scope 1 and 2 and our business air travel. And one of the reasons we made the switch to carbon negative and sort of internally discussed neutrality not being enough for us is that scope 3 was a lion's share of our carbon emissions, and it really was not being addressed within our carbon fee. It was not being addressed holistically as a business unit or each business unit. And so the carbon negative commitment includes our scope 3, and it also marks a transition for us away from relying on carbon offsets and rather focusing on carbon removal. So you'll see in 2020 that transition from the dark green to light green. Apologies for those of you who are colorblind. I realize that might be a difficult one to see. But we will now be focusing on removal of the equivalent amount of carbon that we cannot reduce. All of this, and we will remove more than we emit, hence the carbon negative target. So what does that look like? Well, I think first and foremost, Monica showed the building emissions graph, and the 40% and 11% of that is building materials. That is certainly the case from a building perspective, but I think what many companies who are undertaking scope 3 carbon reporting are seeing is scope 3 is just a giant portion of their total carbon emissions, right? So scope 3 is the blue, and scope 1 and 2 is the red. And just to put that in context, that means the red is all of the energy for all of our data centers and our offices, and it's that small of a fraction in comparison to our supply chain. So it's just this massive opportunity for us to think about how we change business as usual. So within the real estate context, I started looking at, well, what is our supply chain? What is our scope 3? And that really is building materials. And it was something that by and large, we were not focusing on from a real estate perspective. We sort of had figured out operational carbon and how to get back to zero. We were buying 100% renewable electricity. We were increasingly moving to all electric buildings, and made the decision on many of our campuses going forward to only have electric buildings. We made a commitment to electrify our fleet. We were focusing on energy efficiency. So on the operational side, I sort of thought, all right, we've got that under control. The embodied side, no, there was nothing. We really didn't have a way to track and think about reductions. So I'll go through two examples here. The first is our Silicon Valley campus. The way that I sort of think about the embodied carbon or the carbon perspective in general is, or zero carbon is sort of solving both sides of the equation. So as I mentioned, the operational carbon side, we set an embodied carbon or an EUI target. So we managed to the energy budget rather than saying put as much energy in or any energy usage in there as possible and then find reductions. We really sought to have them managed to a budget. We have on-site energy generation and thermal storage. We utilized a significant amount of daylights, but I'll show you some pictures and you'll see why. And there's also natural conditioning in the building with operable windows, which is particularly exciting in the past 2 years, as Monica mentioned. And we have 100% renewable energy for this campus. But on the embodied side, one of the first decisions that we made early in this campus design, the original design was 5 distinct sort of buildings in a giant concrete parking lot. And we decided to keep 2 of the original structures and build them into the larger, sort of ended up being 5 structures, to reduce our embodied carbon. So as Monica mentioned, the best option is to not build in the first place. There was obviously some revisions that needed to happen to those original structures, but it was about a third of the floor area we were able to reuse. The second big decision was to leverage mass timber. We chose to use 100% FSC certified mass timber. We think responsible sourcing for mass timber is incredibly important. So we were really proud to have been able to source that much FSC certified mass timber, and it's the main structural component of our campus. It is the largest mass timber project in the States, as far as we have been told, but I'm sure that someone will beat that record very soon. And it's a 2-story structure, which was a design decision for a couple of reasons. Here are some beautiful pictures, because it wouldn't be a real estate presentation without pretty pictures. But I mean, the mass timber was able to accomplish so much for us from both an embodied carbon perspective, but also limited the number of materials that we needed to use. Like, why would you cover up this beautiful wood? And also just simplified our design in a really great way. So you'll see on the image on the right and on the left, the amount of daylighting and the operable windows and all of these neighborhoods, which are our offices. That's how we organize our offices, all have access to sort of their own patio area. And then you enter up to the green roof, which is a 3-acre green roof. So for many reasons, I am very jealous of our employees that get to sit here, not only because of the amount of sunlight that they get in sunshine they get in Silicon Valley in comparison to Seattle, but also they get to work at this beautiful building. And this is an image of just the construction and how simple it is to sort of fly in these panels. And once you get the hang of it, it goes quite quickly. So that took a while to get to that point. And then our other example is our Redmond project. So our headquarters is in Redmond, Washington. For those of you who are unaware or have not been, it's about 125 buildings, 14 million square feet. So it's a sizable campus. We are currently redeveloping a portion of that campus, taking down 12 of the original structures that Bill Gates built and building 17 buildings in their place. So this project started in 2017, I believe. And one of the things that we struggled with is, if we know the future, we need to be zero carbon, according to all climate science and what our commitments are, which at that point was only carbon neutrality. What does that mean? And can we prove that we can deliver zero carbon buildings today? And the answer was yes, but there's a lot of work that goes in that. So as I mentioned, the both sides of the equation, operational carbon, we set an EUI target. We have 100% renewable electricity, which in this campus, we actually worked with the Washington Utility Council or Commission, and were granted an open access contract so we can directly procure renewable electricity, which we are in a regulated market. That was a 9-year project, or 6-year project, but has been able to move us to 100% renewable electricity direct sourced. And then finally, we made the decision to have no fossil fuels for daily operations. So the biggest implication here was our cooking. So we will serve well over 10,000 meals a day with only electric equipment, which has been a big commitment to figure out, and we're really excited to deliver it now, but certainly was not an easy decision 3 years ago when commercially available all electric equipment was few and far between. But we feel very confident in delivering this now. It also meant that we built an all electric central utility plant with geothermal wells, and we have around, I think it's 800 geothermal wells that go 500 feet into the ground. So a sizable geothermal field. But then the question was, how do we do embodied carbon? So at the time, we wanted to set a reduction, and one of our general contractors, Skanska, Skanska Balfour Beatty, came to our pitch and said, well, this is how much you're going to emit, and we'd like to help you reduce. And we said, great, what do you have for us? And they were working on a tool that allowed you to compare the building material carbon emissions and make reductions based on data, which very much aligns to what Microsoft likes to do. So we were one of the founding funders and pilers of the EC3 tool. One of our favorite parts about EC3 is that it was committed to be a free to use tool. So you all can sign up for it today for free. And it also really was committed to data transparency and open access code. So really allowing for universal access to this data, which historically, and on some of the tools that Monica had up on her slide, some of those tools are proprietary tools that you have to pay in to get access to this data. And EC3 really wanted to change that paradigm, really wanted to say, how do we democratize this data so that everybody has it to make building decisions? So this is one of the views of EC3, but I think it really explains how useful it is as you go in. So it was developed as with a general contractor in mind. So essentially what you would do is you put in your bill of materials for a building, and you put in, and then that tells you the total carbon emissions of each of the materials that you're specifying, and that gives you the opportunity to reduce on those materials. So what you can do in many ways, number one is understand, where am I going to get the biggest return on my investment, right? So if I'm focusing on, in this example, if I'm focusing on shotcrete, maybe that's not like the biggest opportunity because board insulation has a bigger total carbon emissions, or the superstructure, as Monica mentioned, steel and concrete have significantly more carbon emissions than some of the TI components. So we're going to focus on shell and core much more than interiors. So it gives you the information to say, if I'm going to pay a premium, here's where I will have the biggest impact for that premium. It also allows you to compare different materials and get an understanding of what the available reductions are in a market. So you'll see on the left here, we just pulled out an example of Washington State rebar. So you can go in the tool and enter, I'm looking for rebar produced in Washington State or concrete produced in Washington State with this much cure time. And then it pulls up all of the available EPDs, which I'll go into what an EPD is in a second. It basically says, okay, for the thousands of Washington State rebar, here's the maximum carbon emissions of this. Here's the minimum. So product A has the max, product B has the min. Here is the 80% of the total available products meet this conservative number. I believe achievable is 30%. I might be wrong there. But it gives you this range, right? So you sort of know where you're going to be able to see reductions. And this was really helpful as we went to bid. So this is an example of a concrete bid that we ran, and we asked them for their lowest embodied carbon material, and then we asked them for the premium, or we asked them for the premium associated with that lowest embodied carbon material. So essentially, like, tell us what your bid is of what you would normally give us. Tell us what your lowest number would be, and then tell us what the premium would be associated with going for the lowest one. In this bid, there was no premium associated with either of the proposed materials. One had a 31% reduction and one had a 13% reduction. So we went with supplier A because there was no cost premium, and so you just pick the lower one. And so, not every material is this. Certainly we can talk about premiums for mass timber, and particularly now, but there are definitely lower embodied carbon materials out there today that have no cost premium. You just have to ask the question. Just giving you a little bit of an insight of EPD. Think about an EPD like a nutrition label. So your nutrition label on your box of cereal says, this is the serving size and this is how many calories are associated with it. An EPD says, this is the amount of material and this is the global warming potential of that material. All this information is collected in an LCA or a life cycle assessment. And what that LCA pulls together is supplier specific manufacturing data. It sometimes includes industry or representative data if supplier specific information is not available. It might include, site. There's a lot of complexity within this, but all of that together, if you think about the nutrition label example, you have all of your ingredients that go into it and the associated calories with those ingredients. That then goes into an LCA. It creates an EPD, which gives you the global warming potential, and that's what is digitized within EC3. So that's what allows for those comparabilities, is that there is independently verified, these are called type 3 EPDs. So EC3 only allows third-party verified EPDs into the tool, so you can trust the data. And it allows for that apples to apples comparison, and thus us making more informed decisions on building materials. So I will just share a couple of resources for the group, and then we can go into questions. So we wrote a white paper on what we have done to date on reducing embodied carbon in our projects. We really aimed for this to explain lessons learned. So things that we wish we had known before we started. Some of the specifics of, like, how do you write specifications? How do you get your general contractors to track the amount of carbon associated with the subcontractors who do excavation on the site, or bring different equipment that they could bring more efficient equipment, and how do you put requirements around that? We are pursuing ILFI zero carbon certification, so we put some information in that some information about the deconstruction and reuse on the project. So this is, I think it's 12 pages, but it's a pretty good summary of what we've learned to date. The Rocky Mountain Institute recently published this study, which I reference all the time when I'm asked about cost premiums. This is, the study found that between, I think it's 19 to 46% reduction in all materials with no cost premium. So it obviously depends on the material and the quantity and where you're sourcing it from, but the analogy that, or the story that I like to tell is when we all started thinking about building efficiency and we just figured out we like needed to turn off the lights at night, and then we all saw 30% reductions, and building engineers were like super excited, and we threw parties and we bought sheet cakes, and it was a very exciting time. And it cost us no money. We just had to turn off the lights. That's where we are in embodied carbon. Like this, we're in the sheet cake phase. So you can absolutely find reductions today that will cost you no money, just will probably cost you a little bit of soft cost money in terms of getting the data. But this is doable today. Getting significant reductions is going to cost more, but you can find replacements today at no to low cost. And then Carbon Leadership Forum and the folks from Building Transparency who created EC3 have a group, that's two groups. One's called Materials Carbon Action Network, and one is called the Owners Carbon Action Network. I would highly recommend if you are in either of those categories to look up this group. It puts companies together who are working on this to share lessons learned, create tools and resources. This is one of the tools that was created as part of the Owners Can Network, which really identifies responsibility throughout the project and what you would need to do and when. And it's an interactive, a pretty cool tool. So would recommend you check that out. I think that's it.